Picture this: a millionaire basketball star with everything money could buy, penthouse views, designer cars, and a perfect wife who believed in justice. But when that same wife discovered evidence that could destroy his empire, he made a choice that would shock the world. 5 gunshots, one body dumped in the vast Pacific Ocean, and a man who thought he was untouchable. But here's what Tobias Renard never counted on. The dead don't always stay silent. What would you do if you discovered your spouse's darkest secret? Would you stay quiet to protect the life you built together? Or would you risk everything to expose the truth? I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, power, and karma. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why they say the ocean never forgets. Before we dive into this twisted tale of betrayal and revenge, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Speaks. We bring you the most shocking true crime stories that will leave you speechless. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me introduce you to our players in this deadly game. Tobias Renard, a basketball superstar living in a waterfront mansion worth millions, with endorsement deals that made him the face of luxury brands. To the world, he was perfection in motion. Evelina Mora, an art conservator turned activist, brilliant and fearless, with a moral compass that pointed true north. She had notebooks full of details about everything she cared about, and she cared about justice above all else. 2 people, one deadly secret, a love story that ended in murder. Their world was one of red carpets and private jets, charity galas where champagne flowed like water, and social media posts that screamed success. But behind the golden gates of their waterfront home, darkness was brewing. You see, Evelina had stumbled upon something in Tobias's private office, documents that revealed deals that could ruin lives. And when she confronted him about it, demanding he come clean, Tobias realized his perfect world was about to crumble. So he made a choice that would haunt him forever. But here's the thing about murder. You can dump a body in the deepest part of the ocean. You can scrub away every fingerprint. You can lie to police and lawyers and the world. But you can't hide from karma. Tell me in the comments, do you believe in karma? Have you ever seen someone get exactly what they deserved? Because Evelina Moore was about to teach Tobias Renard a lesson from beyond the grave. Let's rewind to where this nightmare began. Tobias Renard wasn't born into money. He clawed his way up from a cramped apartment in a port city where dreams came cheap, but success cost everything. While other kids played video games, Tobias was in the gym at 5 a.m., perfecting his free throws until his hands bled. The scouts saw what they wanted to see: height, precision, and that rare ability to stay calm when millions of eyes were watching. But what they missed were the private rituals Tobias performed before every game, the way he demanded complete silence after victories, and how he kept his teammates at arm's length even during celebrations. Success transformed him into something the media loved: polished, wealthy, and perfectly quotable. Designer clothes replaced his thrift store finds. Penthouse views replaced his childhood window that looked out onto a parking lot. Private jets replaced bus rides. But with every upgrade, Tobias felt more hollow inside. Have you ever felt like you're performing your own life instead of living it? Drop a comment and let True Crime Speaks know, because Tobias was about to cross paths with someone who would see right through his performance. Evelina Moore appeared in his world like a lightning bolt cutting through artificial darkness. While everyone else at the charity fundraiser was there to see and be seen, she was there working, actually working, talking about art restoration projects in communities that most of these wealthy donors had never even visited. Tobias spotted her from across the room, captivated not just by her beauty, but by something he'd forgotten existed: authenticity. When she spoke about saving damaged paintings, her eyes lit up with genuine passion. When she laughed, it wasn't calculated for the cameras. When she looked at him, she saw past the brand and the bank account. Their courtship played out like a fairy tale in the tabloids. Gallery openings where they posed like sculptures themselves. Courtside seats where Evelina cheered louder than anyone else. Vacation photos from places that existed more in travel magazines and real life. But fairy tales don't show what happened behind closed doors. Evelina had a habit that drove Tobias crazy. She wrote everything down. Every conversation, Every detail that mattered to her, every observation about the world around her. Those notebooks were everywhere in their home, filled with her careful handwriting documenting everything from art techniques to social injustices she wanted to address. And she was blunt in ways that cut straight to the bias's deepest insecurities. When he bragged about a new endorsement deal, she'd ask what the company's labor practices were like. When he complained about negative press, she'd point out that maybe the criticism had merit. When he tried to control how they appeared in public, she'd remind him that their relationship wasn't a marketing campaign. Friends who tried to spend time with them often left feeling like they'd witnessed something beautiful but fragile. Two intense people who brought out both the best and worst in each other. Their arguments were as passionate as their reconciliations, and everyone could sense that this love story was heading somewhere explosive. The marriage initially seemed to calm Tobias's inner storm. Evelina introduced routines that slowed down his frantic pace. Long mornings in bed talking about everything except basketball, evenings with no phones where they'd watch the city lights dance on the water below their balcony. For a brief moment, Tobias even tried her hobbies. He took up sketching, claiming it reminded him of the perfect arc of a basketball through the net. Those drawings were terrible, but Evelina kept every single one, telling him that practice made improvement, not perfection. But success has a way of attracting parasites, and Tobias's empire was built on more than just his jump shot. Bad investments started piling up like missed free throws. An early sponsor came forward with legal claims that threatened to expose private agreements Tobias had thought were buried forever. The pressure mounted like water behind a dam. Every endorsement contract contained clauses about moral behavior and brand protection. Every public appearance required careful scripting to avoid questions about his finances. Every phone call from his lawyers brought worse news. And in the middle of all this chaos, Evelina's moral compass kept pointing toward truth while Tobias's pointed toward survival. The woman who had once been his anchor was starting to feel like an anchor dragging him down. Her questions about his business dealings weren't curiosity anymore. They felt like threats. Her notebooks weren't just personal journals. They were potential evidence. Her integrity wasn't inspiring. It was dangerous. What Tobias didn't realize was that Evelina had already started connecting dots that would soon spell his doom. Those notebooks weren't just recording their love story. They were documenting the unraveling of everything he'd built on lies. Money changes people, but desperation transforms them into something unrecognizable. Tobias Renard was learning this lesson the hard way as his perfect life began crumbling from the inside out. The first crack appeared during what should have been a routine evening. Evelina had gone to Tobias's home office looking for a charger when she stumbled across something that made her blood run cold. A draft email on his laptop screen, addressed to his agent, outlining an arrangement that could destroy innocent families. Picture this. Your spouse, the person you trust most in the world, has been hiding deals that could hurt people you care about. What would you do? Tell me in the comments, because Evelina's next move would set everything in motion. She confronted him that same night, not with anger, but with the kind of calm disappointment that cuts deeper than screaming. She'd printed the email and laid it on their kitchen counter, like evidence in a trial. Tobias's response was textbook damage control, denial, minimization, justification. He swore it was just a negotiation tactic, not a real plan. He promised he'd never actually go through with anything unethical. He begged her to trust him one more time. But Evelina's moral compass had been set by parents who taught her that integrity wasn't negotiable. She'd spent her career restoring damaged art, and she knew the difference between something that could be saved and something that was rotted from the core. Their argument became a nightly ritual, each one cutting deeper than the last. They weren't fighting about the email anymore. They were fighting about who they had become as people. Evelina pushed for transparency, while Tobias demanded loyalty. She wanted confession while he insisted on protection. Have you ever watched love transform into something unrecognizable right before your eyes? Because that's exactly what was happening in their waterfront mansion while the city sparkled innocently below. The pressure on Tobias intensified from every direction. Social media whispers suggested he'd coerced a former teammate into some kind of hush arrangement years earlier. A journalist started asking uncomfortable questions about timeline gaps in his public statements. Creditors circled like sharks smelling blood in the water. Tobias began changing in ways that frightened even him. He canceled interviews without explanation. He spent hours on late-night phone calls with advisors, speaking in code about managing narratives and controlling outcomes. He jumped at every unexpected sound, convinced that reporters were hiding in shadows. Evelina watched the man she'd married disappear, replaced by someone paranoid and calculating. But she also noticed something else. Documents disappearing from his office, hard drives being wiped, phone conversations that stopped abruptly when she walked into rooms. Her notebooks began filling with observations that read less like love letters and more like surveillance reports. Times when Tobias claimed to be in business dealings, but his car was spotted elsewhere. Conversations where his stories didn't match his previous versions. Credit card statements for purchases that made no sense. The breaking point came on a humid evening when the air felt thick enough to swim through. Evelina had discovered something that made all her previous concerns look trivial, a recorded voicemail that proved Tobias had been lying about everything. She wanted to make it public, not for revenge, but because she believed people deserved to know the truth about someone they'd made into a hero. In her mind, staying silent made her complicit in future harm. Tobias begged her to reconsider. He warned that the fallout would destroy more than just his career. It would ruin their life together, their friends, their future. He painted pictures of poverty and public humiliation that awaited them if she pressed forward. But Evelina was done being scared into silence. She'd spent too many nights lying awake, wondering how many people might get hurt while she protected a man who'd chosen lies over love. Her exhaustion with secrecy had reached a breaking point. What started as a conversation escalated into their most vicious fight yet. Voices raised, accusations flew, and years of buried resentments exploded like a dam bursting. Tobias felt his carefully constructed world slipping away with every word Evelina spoke. And then something shifted in his eyes. A moment when a man Evelina had married completely disappeared, replaced by someone capable of unthinkable actions. The argument moved from their living room to the kitchen, then toward the sliding doors that led to their waterfront balcony. The city lights reflected off the harbor like scattered diamonds, beautiful and oblivious to the tragedy unfolding above. Tobias's panic transformed into something much darker. His years of controlling narratives and managing outcomes had taught him that problems could be eliminated if you were willing to pay the right price. But this problem wasn't a bad contract or negative press coverage. This problem was a woman he'd once loved more than basketball, more than money, more than his own carefully crafted image. And in that moment of complete moral collapse, Tobias made a choice that would haunt him forever. The violence that followed shattered more than just their relationship. It revealed the true cost of building a life on lies. When a man you trust most becomes the person you should fear most, nowhere is safe. What Tobias didn't understand was that Evelina had been preparing for this possibility longer than he realized. Her notebooks weren't just observations, they were insurance policies. Her questions weren't just curiosity, they were investigations. And her final act of defiance would reach far beyond anything he could control or contain. Some moments change everything forever. What happened next in that waterfront mansion would transform a love story into a murder case, and a basketball star into a killer. The argument had reached a crescendo that neighbors 3 blocks away would later tell police they'd heard echoing across the water. Evelina stood by their sliding glass doors, the recorded voicemail evidence clutched in her hand like a weapon she refused to put down. "I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your choices," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "People deserve to know who you really are." Tobias felt something snap inside his chest. Not his heart breaking, but his last connection to the man he used to be. The basketball star, the media darling, the husband who'd once sketched terrible drawings just to make his wife smile. All of that disappeared in an instant. What replaced him was pure survival instinct. Not the kind that makes heroes, but the kind that creates monsters. The first gunshot shattered the sliding glass door behind Evelina. The sound echoed across the harbor like a thunderclap, sending seabirds scattering into the night sky. But it wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to terrify her into silence. Evelina dropped the phone containing the voicemail, but she didn't drop to her knees begging forgiveness like Tobias expected. Instead, she looked at him with something worse than fear, disappointment, so profound it felt like another kind of death. "You can't shoot away the truth, Tobias," she whispered. That's when he realized she was right. The evidence wasn't just on that phone. It was in cloud backups, in copies she'd hidden, in recordings she'd made that he didn't even know existed. Killing the messenger wouldn't kill the message. But panic makes people do impossible things, and Tobias had passed the point where logic mattered. The next 4 shots happened so quickly that forensic experts would later struggle to establish the exact sequence. What they could determine was this. Evelina tried to run toward their bedroom, probably hoping to reach the panic button connected to their security system. She almost made it. The silence that followed was worse than the gunshots. No sirens, no neighbors rushing over, no immediate consequences. Just Tobias standing in his destroyed living room, holding a smoking gun, looking down at the woman who'd loved him despite everything. But here's what separates amateurs from professionals when it comes to murder. Professionals think beyond the killing to the cover-up. Amateurs just react. Tobias was definitely an amateur. His first instinct was to call his lawyer, his publicist, his crisis management team, anyone who'd spent years protecting his image. Then reality hit. No amount of spin could explain away a dead wife in his living room. That's when the choreography began. Tobias had spent his entire career following game plans designed by coaches. And now, he improvised the most important game plan of his life. How to make Evelina Mora disappear forever. He spent the next 3 hours moving like a man possessed. First, he had to deal with the immediate evidence. Blood spatter on walls, bullet holes in glass, the smell of gunpowder that seemed to coat everything. Cleaning supplies became his new best friends. Bleach, hydrogen peroxide, industrial-strength carpet cleaner. He used everything he could find to scrub away traces of violence. He'd watched enough crime shows to know about DNA and forensic evidence, but panic makes people sloppy. The hardest part wasn't cleaning up the scene. It was moving Evelina's body. This woman who'd once danced in his arms, who'd cheered from courtside seats, who'd filled their home with laughter and terrible cooking experiments. She was now dead weight he had to dispose of like garbage. He wrapped her in their expensive Egyptian cotton sheets, the same ones where they'd spent lazy Sunday mornings planning their future together. The irony wasn't lost on him, but irony doesn't help you carry a corpse to your car. Getting her body to his vehicle required 3 trips to the garage. First the body, then the bloody sheets and towels, then the cleaning supplies he'd used. Each trip felt like an eternity where any neighbor could look out their window and see a famous athlete loading suspicious bundles into his trunk. The drive to Marina took 25 minutes through empty city streets. 25 minutes where every red light felt like a trap. Every police car felt like divine justice. Every witness felt like the end of his freedom. But luck favors the desperate sometimes, and Tobias made it to the harbor without being stopped. He'd chosen the ocean because he thought it was infinite, a place where secrets sink into darkness and never resurface. The rental boat he'd paid for in cash bobbed in its slip, like it was waiting for him, though the marina attendant who took his money would remember the famous face that tried to avoid eye contact. Loading Evelina's body onto the boat required strength he didn't know he still possessed. Adrenaline and terror made people capable of superhuman feats, and Tobias managed to get everything aboard without being seen by the night security guard, who was conveniently taking a bathroom break. The trip to deep water took 2 hours. 2 hours of navigating by GPS while his dead wife lay wrapped in sheets behind him. 2 hours of telling himself that this was the only way, that exposing his secrets would have destroyed innocent people, that Evelina had forced his hand. But lies don't comfort the guilty. They just make the weight heavier. When he finally reached the shipping lanes where commercial vessels had churned the water into a dark, anonymous soup, Tobias made his final mistake. He believed the ocean would keep his secrets forever. He weighted down Evelina's body with anchor chains from the boat's emergency kit. He said a prayer that felt like blasphemy even as the words left his mouth. And then he rolled his wife over the side and watched her disappear beneath waves that reflected the city lights like scattered stars. The journey back to shore felt like traveling between 2 different worlds, the one where he was a murderer and the one where he still had pretend to be a grieving husband. What Tobias didn't realize was that Evelina had prepared for this exact scenario months earlier. Her final insurance policy was already ticking like a time bomb, waiting to explode as carefully constructed lies. The ocean had accepted his offering, but it wouldn't keep his secrets, because karma was just getting started. The first rule of getting away with murder is simple. Make sure nobody notices the victim is missing. Tobias Renard thought he had this covered, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. Evelina Mora had a sister who knew her better than anyone else in the world. Celeste Mora was everything Evelina was, but quieter about it. Where Evelina fought injustice with protests and public speeches, Celeste fought it with documentaries that exposed truth through careful observation. She had the same moral compass as her sister, but she also had something even more dangerous: a filmmaker's instinct for detecting when stories didn't add up. The first red flag went up when Evelina missed their weekly phone call. Not unusual by itself, but when it happened 3 days in a row, Celeste started paying attention. Tobias's explanation was smooth and practiced. Evelina had taken a spontaneous trip to visit an old colleague on the coast. She needed space to think about some personal projects. She left her phone behind because she wanted to disconnect from social media pressure. Everything about the story felt rehearsed to Celeste, who'd spent years interviewing people who were hiding something. The details were too convenient, too perfectly designed to explain away every question she might ask. So she started asking different questions. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, even when you couldn't prove it? Tell True Crime speaks in the comments.
During Celeste's investigation, she discovers a mysterious message. The notebooks are safe. Look to the art. A midnight meeting at the gallery holds secrets. Will she uncover the truth about Evelina's disappearance, or will she become the next target? Stay tuned for part 2.